Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today here on episode 26 of the Adam Hazara Show. That's airing here on Sunday, May 4th, 2025. Of course, as always, we got the latest and greatest of Lake Braddock news in baseball and softball on here, continuing the spring season. Of course, big week coming up, final week for both teams. Of course, a lot of headlines in Lake Braddock Baseball. They're on a 4-game losing streak, losing 3 in a row from last week. Of course, they're coming off some very big losses. Softball, on the other hand, continues to keep rolling. We're going to kind of talk about, their last couple of games here as we come into the final week of that regular season as well. So be sure, of course, always leave a like, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the show over on X at Adam Hazara Show. Share this with a friend. Always turn on notifications so you do not miss another show. And finally, you can always, of course, post your question in the live chat or any comments that you have if you want to be part of the conversation you had today. We had a pretty good conversation last week here on the show. Let's see if we're going to continue that up today. So let's get started tonight here on episode 26 of the Adam Hazara Show. So, of course, as always, we're going to start off on the baseball side of things. So, pretty, like we said in the opening, pretty rough stretch that Lake Braddock Baseball is going through right now. A 4-game losing streak. Of course, they lost all 3 of their games last week. The first game they were coming off a loss versus West Springfield about, a week and a half ago. Tough loss against a big rival. Couldn't really get some hits going in that game. Defense didn't do well. And you come into this week, and, you were thinking against a team, against Woodson, who is one of the worst teams in the area again this year, you would think that this would be a game where the Bruins would rebound big time, and you would think that they would squash Woodson right out of the water, like they usually have over the last few years. Man, guys, it was the complete opposite that we saw. A very devastating 3-0 loss. And, it's very, it's kind of disturbing to see, especially the offensive production we saw in that game. I believe the Bruins only had 3 hits. Woodson, not a lot of big-name pitchers. They pitched Will Wise, who ended up pitching a shutout. And for the Bruins, they had Jack Cavallari on a mound, who, again, continues to be a really good pitcher for him this year. He pitched a good 5 innings of 1-run ball. He gave him a solid outing. But again, the key thing was for the offense. And it's very concerning because this was a game also where the Bruins, who are desperate for wins right now, they needed to beat a team that you expect them to beat. Being a Woodson team that I believe was coming into that game with a record of 4-12 overall. And their 2 wins in the district were, I believe, against Robinson, who is even worse than them. They're the worst team in the Patriot District this year. So, that was a game, that the Bruins needed to capitalize on. That's a team that they need to beat. They need to keep momentum in a game that they probably should have won. They were in it. The pitching did well enough. You saw, Matt Shabe come on pitch, who's rarely pitched. He's been playing shortstop. I don't think there's been some injury concerns with him, so he's only been playing shortstop rather than pitcher. But he pitched an inning. Andrew Laskowski got another inning. He's continued to look well, for the Bruins this year. And so for Lake Braddock, unfortunately, that offense did not do well. You have hitters like, Ryan Harding, of course, was out. That was a big loss. He was dealing with a sore back. He was not playing on Tuesday. As he continued to deal with those problems from that West Springfield game where he was only DHing. And then you also had a couple of your bigger name hitters this year kind of slumping as well as of late. Dom Quadros had been slumping. I know he had one of a few hits for Bruins that game, though. And Evan George, who has been pretty cold for plate. So a couple of your big hitters, obviously not, living up to the expectations as of late, as they've been going through a slump. I understand, everyone goes through a slump, but, you think it would be, late down a stretch when you're trying to get big wins and trying to get a high spot for a playoff seed. It couldn't have come at a worse time for this Bruins team. And then, you still have, because Ryan Harding needed to sit because of that sore back, you were short in the outfield. You were having both Kenny Hawkins and Oliver Crandall starting in your outfield, who have been 2 outfielders who have been part of that revolving door out in right field this year. A position that has really struggled for the Bruins this year in terms of offense. Crandall was a guy last year that started most games for Bruins, but he didn't really hit because he's not really known for his bat. He's been hitting more so this year, down the stretch. Bruins are just kind of going back to the guy who, probably has the most experience, as he already has a full experience under his belt, of course, starting last year. And so he was starting, but Kenny Hawkins, that's a guy who's coming up from JV, the sophomore. You're hoping that he will do some good things for you, but for a lot of the times this year in right field, it's a lot of plug and play over there. So, certainly not a good situation over there. And here's the part that that irks me the most: the designated hitter spot. And I have, we've mentioned this name a lot here on the pod this year, and that is named CJ Prentice. And, the thing that people say, well, he can't hit, he strikes out too much. Well, in terms of power, in terms of the production he's had this year, and you see his numbers on Max Preps, he probably gives you the best chance out of anyone that they were throwing out there at DH. He did not start the DH game. He came in to pinch hit for Walter Rosardi in the 7th inning, who started the game. The reason they started Rosardi was due to the fact that he had, I believe, 2 hits, 3 RBIs first time versus Woodson. Now, again, Rosardi this time was facing different pitchers. But again, Prentice, between him and Rosardi, Prentice has gotten more bulk in terms of the starts this year, and he's shown he can hit. And, despite the strikeouts and all the plate discipline concerns that the Bruins coaches have, he's still been a solid enough piece if you look at the numbers. Yes, his average maybe is not the highest you'd like it to be at times. Maybe the on-base percentage isn't there. Maybe he leads the team in strikeouts. But here's the thing. We're in a, I'll mention this again, we're in a day and age of baseball where none of that matters as much anymore. You can still hit 230, 240 and still be a good hitter. This is not 1975 anymore. We're in 2025, 50-year difference. You can still have, you can still be a productive hitter even if your on-base percentage is a bit below 300. If you're slugging the ball enough, you're driving enough runs, if you're producing power enough, then you can still be a consistent contributor. And that's the thing. And the one guy that does that has been CJ Prentice. Anyone who else they put in a DH spot this year has not been that. I believe CJ has had around a 300 on-base percentage. It might be a bit lower. He's high in his total of strikeouts. I know that he's, but still he might not be hitting for the best average. He's not going to hit 300 for you, but still he's getting some good hits. He's showing some good extra base power. He's being consistent enough in the power department to be a good hitter. And that's what the Bruins need in their lineup right now. This is a lineup this year that is struggling to have top-heavy, firepower, around the lineup. You need someone to give you the big bang. The Bruins only have 1 home run this year. That belongs to Evan George, who, of course, again has been mentioned, has been slumping a bit lately. You need CJ Prentice in that lineup. He's going to hit the ball a ton in terms of its distance. He needs to be in there. And it kind of, it's confusing to me why he's not even in the lineup at least as DH already. He can also catch, and Evan Chambers has been very good as a freshman this year. I understand. And he should probably also be in the lineup too. He leads the Bruins, I believe, in on-base percentage. He's been having a very good rookie freshman year, and he should be in there. Over as that catcher or DH, you should play with both of them. More so, though, this conversation, though, is about Prentice, of course, again, and the fact that he's not getting enough starts this year. And, this is one of the problems this year. The Bruins have had pretty questionable management, in my opinion. We'll get into the other reasons, mainly the pitching, a little later on, just in a few minutes here on the Adam Hazara Show. Sorry for a table shake there. But again, it kind of is weird to see that, Prentice is not starting at a good enough level. Again, this is also a guy that can hit the ball 100 miles an hour. He can give you the big bang. He can hit for a lot of power too. His exit velo is really good. It's, he averages probably between 90 and 95. That's the exit velo that Jamie Wiskovsky was hitting. Name one other Bruin on the team who can do that right now. One other Bruin. Maybe there's a couple, but not many compared to CJ Prentice. So you need him in the lineup right now, a lineup that is struggling, that has been kind of struggling to produce runs in some games this year. He's one of your best threats to have in there. So he should be starting every day. And it still kind of bothers me why, as to why he's not even starting for Late Braddock consistently. So, you probably should have seen that in the Woodson game again. That offense, even with missing Ryan Harding, I think for offense could have still done well enough to hit Will Wise and the Woodson pitcher. I feel like the Bruins weren't taking advantage of opportunities. Maybe they were being shaken by the fact that they didn't do very well versus our rivals in West Springfield on offense, scoring a 1 run that was unearned. But across those 2 games, they did not score that 1 unearned. They were shut out they'd be shut out in 14 straight innings. Have they not scored that unearned run versus West Springfield? They are shut out in their 14 straight innings. Now, West Springfield makes sense because they have some good pitching. Woodson, though, again, pretty questionable with that offensive performance. Pretty disastrous, as I should say. Right here, right now. So now that takes you to the Wednesday game at Capital One Center in Tysons with St. Albans, one of the best private school teams in the area. And the Bruins did kind of turn it around offensively of the game. They had 5 runs scored in that game. Leo Delum was on the mound for Bruins. We'll get to him a bit on the pitching side. He didn't walk anyone, but he still struggled, giving up, I believe, 4 earned in 5 innings. And so, but at least you saw the Bruins score some more offensive runs. So the offense is, you saw it continuing in the right direction. And then that carries you to Friday's game with Alexandria City, a game that really mattered. Another team besides West Springfield that is competitive to Lake Braddock this year. Alexandria City is now one of the top dogs in the region alongside the Spartans. And, they still beat the Bruins soundly. Or they still beat them. Now, I wouldn't say soundly. Take that back. Sorry about that. They beat them 5-4 in that Friday game. And so, the Bruins, 4 runs with the way the offense has been volatile this year. That is, that's not bad for them. The problem was, though, in the game, goes over. Now, before we start the pitching, I do want to point out CJ Prentice what he did in that game. He started against a good Alexandria team with a lot of pitching depth. You know what he did? A double, 2 walks in the game. He struck out once, but he's still gone on base. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. So, for all the haters out there saying, well, he can't hit, he's going to strike out every time. There you go. There's his game where he walked twice. He actually did very well. So, you have that. And again, he hit an extra base hit. So, he has good, he showed the power potential again there. And a Bruins offense, I wouldn't blame the offense so much. I feel like the offense did well enough. And, even despite the fact that Alexandria City did not pitch one of their 2D1 guys in Jason Khrushchev, the ECU commit, or Bucknell commit, Liam Jones, the Bruins still scored a total of 4 runs, which again is good for the offense with how volatile they've been at times this year. We mentioned, games in the past also, the Woodson shutout with, national district teams like Edison, a worse team like in Fairfax, who they only scored 3 runs against when they beat them back in around early on in April. There's a few games there where the Bruins offense has not been, as consistent as you would want it to be against teams that are of lesser competitiveness, as I should say. So with this Alexandria City game, 4 runs was good enough, but the one problem for this game was the pitching. And, Bo Padgett, the guy you expect on the mound, Bruins ace to be good, finally thumped. And he finally tripped, and he gave up 5 earned runs. The first bad outing that he's had all year. Now, you knew he was going to be due for a bad outing. He can't be pitching like this every day. He was due for it. But, part of the blame does go on Bo Padgett for losing that game. Because, again, if he did pitch well, the Bruins could have won. And, again, if he started to tire out, guess what? Maybe you could have gone to, someone else. I don't know if Jack Cavalario would have been still eligible because he pitched 5 innings on Tuesday. I'm not sure on that in accordance with the VHL rules. You could have maybe went to, maybe Hudson Drum in that game. One of your other pitchers, maybe if he was tiring out, give him a chance. But again, I understand, the Bruins were desperate for a win, so they stuck with Bo the whole game. And again, he didn't pitch very well. He only gave up 5 earned runs. And so, that's a game where you got to, kind of give him some blame. And, in part he is, of course, to blame because he did lose the game for the Bruins, giving up those 5 runs. Had you only given up, how you still pitched a quality start, the Bruins would have won the game and they would have gotten the statement win that they're still looking for this year. And beating that West Springfield Alexandria City team has been an absolute bane to them this season. But the thing with this is that here's where this irks me the most. So if you're going to have Bo Padgett pitch against, if he's your ace and he's going, and if he's going to be pitching and he's going to be your guy against these tough teams, he's going to be the guy you expect to step up the most on the mound. Why? And it takes, and the thing with him is that it's only starting less than 2 weeks ago where he actually got his first appearance versus a tough team in West Springfield. And that was a big test for him. He pitched well. None of the runs that were given up that game were his fault. Now, maybe the 1 home run that was given up to the West Springfield outfielder, but so he still probably gave up 1 run, but those other unrun runs were because of errors. And so, had those not happened, he probably wouldn't have given those up. But, he pitched well. But, the reason I think he didn't do so well against Alexandria City, not fully his fault. Reason for that is because of, again, we mentioned this earlier, this kind of leads into our main segment. Why, the awful management of the pitching staff this year. So if Bo is your guy that you're going to go to, that's going to show up in these big games and pitch against, your biggest rivals, you're waiting until the end of the season to finally have him face those teams when you had a chance to pitch them earlier in the season. And there's no one, and you stated this year that he was going to be your ace. Why wasn't he pitching versus Alexandria City and West Springfield earlier in the season? And you had an opportunity to get him on a pitching schedule you could have planned out beforehand in the season. The reason why he didn't pitch any of those games is because he wasn't lined up to do so. You went with Leo DeLomo. Again, this is no knock on Leo. But he struggled this year. He has struggled immensely this year. His ERA has been near a total of 8 runs this year. And even coming into the season, Leo DeLomo, he was not going to be your main guy. You knew that the pitching situation was going to be up for grabs with Jake Drum, Jamie Wiskowski, Henry Steen, all gone. And you state that Bo Padgett is going to be your number 1 pitcher. You think he's going to be the ace. You like his stuff. You think he's going to be the guy who shows up big time once again. But you lack accountability in trying to give him those opportunities early in the season so that he can prepare later on. You need to give him those opportunities. And if you don't want to start him against, you don't want to throw him right into the fire, you didn't have to throw him right into the fire. That opening day game versus South County, you could have pitched him. That West Springfield game was the 3rd game of the season. They play him in different weeks. You could have pitched him that West Springfield game. And you could have eased him in with a weaker South County team the week prior on opening day. And you wait until the second half of the season. You give him way too much time to ease into it. That's what really irks me about the whole pitching situation this year. And then also another thing. Again, and you didn't even go to Jack Cavalario those games. If Leo DeLomo was going to struggle, you could have pivoted towards Jack Cavalario, another name who was on the top of your pitching list this year. You could have went to him in 2 if you're going to pitch him versus West Springfield, Alexandria City. But no, you're going to go with your guy who's struggling. And again, these are teams you need wins. You knew you were going to face them this early. You don't have, your West Springfield, you're only playing in your 3rd game of the season. You knew you needed to have your best guys out there. You weren't facing them last game of the first district cycle. You needed your best guys out there. You needed early season momentum. And this is a year where the Bruins are entering the season with a lot of question marks. 4-game losing streak. And they're exactly 500 coming into the final week of a regular season because of the management issues that this team has been doing. Now, again, would those management issues fix some of these games? Yeah, for sure. Does it fix every problem the Bruins have? No, it certainly doesn't. But again, there are things that you could have done this season earlier to guarantee yourself to be in a better position going into the final week. And now, you know what? Now, let me tell you something, guys. Now you have to worry about facing, West Potomac and Fairfax teams this week to try to finish over 500 and trying to get a higher seed. West Potomac game is big tomorrow, especially if you want a seed in the higher half of a district. You're going to have to beat West Potomac tomorrow. And again, you're probably going to have to fight with Fairfax. And again, with this Bruins team, any game is possible. If the way the offense performed versus Woodson the other day, you can't really say if the Bruins are going to have a guaranteed win any game, especially if against someone who's really bad, as we saw versus Woodson last week, or Edison this year, or Fairfax, who played very close with them this year. You just don't know with this Bruins team. Not only that, if you lose these two games, guess what? You're probably well on pace. You might be on pace to have your first losing season since 1990. Bruins have a storied history, only 3 losing seasons in their 50-some-odd year history. And you're going to have your first losing season in 35 years because of the decisions you made. While several of these situations could have been avoided. You could have pitched Bo Padgett, against Alexandria City and West Springfield early in the season. You could have had him line up to pitch those games. You could have lined up Jack Cavalario. You're not going for your best pitchers when you need to. You're not, making the best lineup decisions. You're not putting CJ Prentice in there when he's one of the best offensive threats you could have in there right now. So hopefully something needs to change. You still got a chance. This is a week where you say, no hold barns. We're going for it all. We're not holding back. We need some wins. We're going to give it all we got. And that's what the Bruins need to do this week. Now, thank goodness, Austin Dean is not pitching tomorrow for West Potomac because he pitched on Friday. I checked before this stream. He's pitching versus West Potomac. He pitched last week on Friday for the Wolverines. So you probably won't see him. I believe he threw 86 pitches in 3 2/3. So West Potomac is probably not going to pitch him. You'll probably see either Barrett Baker or Liam Cardman pitch that game tomorrow at West Potomac. And for Bruins, Bo Padgett pitched Friday. I would expect you probably see Jack Cavalario in that game. I would like to see them. West Potomac team, they are one of the more above-average teams talking in terms of the Patriot District this year. So you'd like to see, maybe Bo Padgett pitch. Jack Cavalario tomorrow. And in Fairfax, you have senior night. Do you want to go with the senior lineup that game? Again, with the situation you're in, desperate for wins. Again, we'll find out. What I'll say about that is try to go for the win. You have Bo Padgett. You'll have him eligible for that Thursday game. That's when you would want to pitch him. And then a kind of for-fun game on Saturday at Westfield to conclude the regular season, which is a Westfield team that's much improved last year, from last year to this year. They've adjusted better. Fair new head coach. So, that's a good Westfield team that we'll be facing. Sorry about that. And so that's a game we'll look forward to. But again, Bruins need to make better decisions with what they're doing, in my opinion. And so, these are easy things you can fix. It's not rocket science. So, you got that going on. So, again, big week for Bruins, trying to snap the 4-game losing streak, trying to get some momentum going into the postseason. Big games with West Potomac, Fairfax this week. Fairfax senior night, final home game. And then, of course, they conclude the regular season on Saturday at Westfield. So you have that going on. Now let's move over, as we're about half an hour into the show now. Let's move over to the softball side. Now, softball side, they continue to, now, unlike Lake Braddock in baseball, they have continued to beat the teams that they had to. This week, a couple easier games with some lower tier Woodson and Alexandria City teams. They shut out Woodson 5-0. And then, of course, a 12-3 win over Alexandria City Friday night over in Alexandria. Two of the weakest teams in the district that the Bruins need to beat, if they want to keep up momentum, and two teams that they should be to keep up with West Springfield. So they've been able to keep the momentum going after their loss to West Springfield 5-1 on Friday, the 25th of April. Mackenzie Verdejo continues to do well. Of course, the Bruins lineup continues to do very consistently. You're still seeing everyone else do well that you expect to. We'll shout out some other Bruins. Mae Bruin has been doing well for Lake Braddock. She's maintained some good consistency with her bat. In right field this year, Eva Dubray, the freshman third baseman, has been getting on base. She's been hitting for a good average, we've around 270, 280. Still, whatever number it is, it's still pretty good. I think the bottom of the lineup again, kind of for Bruins in baseball with right field. They need to kind of figure out the bottom out lineup and kind of solidify who's going to be their main bats in the postseason. Now, I think as of late, we've seen them going with some of the more experienced players. We've seen Lauren Allen start more for the Bruins. She got quite a few. I know she got some reps last year. I think one player to really watch out for this year, who I've liked seeing, is Isabel Sevier at the plate. She's got some good power. Could definitely provide some good pop in that bottom for the lineup. Olivia Federico has been good in her appearances. So I feel like, you got maybe a couple solid bats there. Maybe I could help you out for the future. We'll see, what Lauren Allen can do, down a stretch for him. And again, the main part for his Bruins team to do well, I think, is kind of that bottom third of the lineup that we saw struggle last year. And, it's just trying to string some consistency there. They do have, again, they are in a pretty easy stretch right now. They need to continue to win some games versus that they face this week. Two easy opponents in West Potomac tomorrow. And then, of course, they conclude the regular season at home on Thursday versus Fairfax. That is their senior night as well. Also, we want to give a quick shout out to Bruins outfielder Rod Samuel for scoring her 100th career run. I believe that was in a Robinson game a couple weeks ago. So big shout out to her. Been a very solid outfielder for Bruins this year. Has continued to do well. And so, so it should be an easy week for Lake Braddock softball again, having a pretty weak schedule. 4 games, so 2 games you expect them to win this week. Seems like they're going to be that 2 seed going into the district tournament starting that starts next week. I think they'll get a bye for the first 2 rounds. So they'll have 1 game to win to get into the district finals. Should be a pretty easy route as long, I think the one team, I'm not going to reel too much. I do want to talk about this more as we, we're going to talk more postseason things here on a podcast next week after the regular season has concluded. That will be, I'm saying that will probably be next Monday. I'm planning on the show being next Monday. Kind of would have had it on Monday this week. But unfortunately, since the 2 teams play tomorrow, we're having it Sunday night here, which is what we've done for a lot of our shows this season. But so with that being said, the Bruins should have an easy route to the district finals. Again, not a very strong region. The only team that I really see posing a threat to Lake Braddock is West Springfield, who of course has beat them twice this year. They have a really good offense, top to bottom. They've been very competitive, with Coach Benson over there doing another great job over there coaching his Spartans. They've had some very solid pitching. Open that Elena Promozic over there continues to find her stride after pitching a good game versus the Bruins, showing kind of the promises she's had a couple years ago with how she pitched very well her freshman year, but she's kind of struggled ever since then. If the Spartans could definitely get some good outings out of her, then she could be maybe a good situation for West Springfield over there. Again, who continues to hit the Bruins well, and so that'll be an enticing matchup. But again, we're not going to reel too much. We're going to get into more of that next week here on the pod, of course. So again, we'll see what happens with the Bruins bomb out lineup. It's going to be, those would be, I think Allen, Sevier, and Federico, those are a few of the options I think that are the best for the bottom bout lineup right now. But we'll see what they do over there. But again, not a lot to look too concerned about on their side. Again, I think the one thing you do again have to watch out for is the bottom bout lineup once again. And, it should be an easy week for them. 2 wins against two pretty bad West Potomac and Fairfax teams that they should beat. So I expect them to do well those games. They're looking in some really good shape to have bye for the first 2 rounds during district tournament next week. So we're going to conclude the show here. Thank you guys so much for watching today. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe, share it with a friend, and make sure to turn on notifications so you do not miss another episode of the show. So thank you guys so much for tuning into the I'm His Air Show today, and I will see you guys next time.